Hi, good morning. This is a foreigner in the Philippines. Well, as I don't get down to the internet cafe with Beth anymore, I've been on house arrest for 6 days now. Haven't been able to get down and attend to comments as I would like to and as I usually do. Yes, we got the chickens this morning. Okay, so it's life back to normal. All of that said, I did want to make a comment on something that people, I wanted to make a video on a book that I've been reading, and people who are already confirmed Christians have misunderstood the point. So I will actually talk to you about this now. Case for Christ. Okay, the Case for Christ is a journalist's personal investigation of the evidence for Jesus. Right, now we're not talking about my beliefs. We're talking about a book that I am reading which has really turned my beliefs around completely. So there are, let me see, there's part 1 and part 2 of this book. But let me tell you what the idea is, the concept behind the book, so that you understand what I've been learning. Okay, so what this man did was he approached the whole story of Jesus from the viewpoint of an investigative journalist. Okay, so rather than even his own beliefs, he actually went in with it as if he were investigating a court case, so that he would look at the thing quite objectively. And in order to do that, he actually interviewed some of the top historical and philosophical religious scholars in the world. No doubt about it, the men that he decided to interview are unbelievable people. Very, very, very talented, super intellectual, super intelligent, and super spiritual. Now, how did he do that? Well, he went to a different expert on a different aspect, as if he were trying to find out whether the case for Jesus was true. So try to understand that now. So here's part 1, examining the record, and I'm just reading from the contents. The eyewitness events. Can the biography of Jesus be trusted? And as his guide was the scholar Dr. Craig Blomberg. Now, he goes through what Dr. Blomberg's, as with all of the people that he interviewed, he goes through what their credibility is, what are their credentials, which are all, without exception, are all incredible. Now, Craig Blomberg. Now, so the eyewitness, testing the eyewitness evidence, and he goes through it asking some real tough questions in all of the cases. So let me just read part 1 for examining the record. Testing the eyewitness evidence. Do the biographies of Jesus stand up to scrutiny? And he gives, incredibly, he gives all of the references that he is going from the Bible. All of the references, so that you can easily go through to the Bible yourself and look at the points that he is bringing up. Right, the documentary evidence, the corroborating evidence. Is there credible evidence for Jesus outside his biographies? The scientific evidence. Does archaeology confirm or contradict Jesus? The rebuttal evidence. So he goes into, is the Jesus of history the same as the Jesus of faith? And as I said, all of these incredible scholars that he goes to deal with all of this give all of their references, they're all experts in their field. Part 2, analysing Jesus, the identity evidence. Was Jesus really convinced that he was the Son of God? The psychological evidence. He goes through to a top psychologist, Dr. Gary Collins. So, for anybody who is interested, as I was, in learning more about Christ, you can go to this book, which I highly recommend, and you can look at what all of these top scholars say. How do they prove their point? So I'm not talking now about if you are an unbeliever. I'm not talking from the viewpoint of someone who doesn't believe. I'm talking about from the viewpoint of somebody who simply wants to learn more about how incredible the evidence is for Christ. That's why the book is called The Case for Christ. He was a court reporter. He was a court crime reporter. He went in, he had to find out what the story was. And in order to illustrate that, he does actually give some real crimes, some real court cases that he investigated. So you don't need to convince me about Christ, because I've been reading this book. This book has been glued to my hand for a few days. It's not an easy book to read, let me tell you. If you're a little bit squeamish, it's not easy, because it goes into exactly what happens when a human being is crucified. The Romans were not the kindest people to the people that they decided were guilty of something or other. But the whole punishment of crucifixion was so incredibly cruel that the Romans did not subject their Roman citizens to this particular death. It was only in the case of extreme work or conviction against the whole Roman Empire. So it was only in the case of that a Roman would be subjected to this. But if you saw the movie that was put out by the Australian about the death of Christ, and if you thought that was cruel, you can forget that. That was a walk in the park. The Jesus in that story had a walk in the park compared to what actually happened to Jesus Christ. And the section, have to say that the section on describing exactly by an expert what happens to a human being when they are crucified had me in tears. The thought that any group, nation could put another human being through this was beyond belief. Because it was expertly done. It was expertly done to be the most excruciating, painful, humiliating, degrading death that any human being could suffer. And they suffered right through to the very end, and it was something that was just unbelievable. I actually cried. And so the book is something that has changed the way that I believe. I had an epiphany during reading this book because of the evidence that is provided, the arguments, the testimony. I never realized, for instance, I never knew about the actual mechanics, if you want to call it that, about what happens to a human being. I never knew about that. I never knew that. I didn't know that the prophecies were so incredible. I didn't know that the Gospels were so incredibly intensively researched, that they were compared, that they compared eyewitnesses, that there were eyewitnesses, and the eyewitnesses then told about what they had seen. But more than one person spoke to an eyewitness. And Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, all of them had their own experience. All of them had their own view on what happened. But in the same case as, let me give you an example. Once when I was driving to a gig with another 3 members of the band that I was in, and I was driving, and it was in the winter in the UK, and approaching a roundabout, that's, if you're American, that's a circle, approaching this particular potential hazard, I hit the brakes and found out that we were on ice. It wasn't, from my viewpoint, it wasn't a huge frightening experience, but the car slid and struck, in the last few miles an hour, struck the roundabout, and we did a bit of damage to the suspension on the car. But we got home and we got to the gig. But I listened to what the other guys in the car said about what happened, and for me, I knew what was happening. We'd hit ice, the car was now sliding, we'd lost traction, and I pumped the brakes, the old car that it was back then, I pumped the brakes, and we almost stopped, but the last part we bumped up against the curb of the roundabout. Okay, that was my testimony of what happened. We were all in the same car, we all saw the same thing, but the other guys all told something different. One guy who was afraid of everything related it as if it was a terrifying moment at which we had careered towards the roundabout, completely out of control in a slide, and then eventually just crashed into the roundabout, and he feared for his life, and he wondered in that moment if he'd made his will out. And that was the other extreme. And then the others were slightly different. Yeah, it was a little bit scary, but no damage. And one said, well, it was nothing, it just skidded a bit, that's all, there's no damage. See, same situation, same event, and completely different eyewitness account. So that's what all of the experts in this book go into, the fact that one person can see an event and report it completely differently to another, but going through the investigation, going through all of the testimonies, you will find a thread of what happened. And that's what these experts are expert at, that they can go through all of the different testimonies, like when the women went to the tomb of Christ, and they went there to anoint the body. Completely illogical, because how would they ever roll back the stone? They wouldn't be able to do that. But when it was reported, Matthew reported that there was Mary Magdalene, and that there was the mother of Christ, and there was somebody else. And then somebody else reported it quite differently. They said, well, yes, Mary Magdalene and so-and-so, so-and-so. But going through the thread of the accounts of all of them, they were able to see that it was true that a group of women who all loved Jesus Christ had gone to the tomb in the hope that they would be able to anoint the body. And that was the thread of truth that went through it. So there is a skill in working out. You could be very superficial and say, well, he said it was Mary this, and she said it was Mary that, and he said that a man was with them, but there wasn't, because somebody else said that there wasn't. The thread of truth is there for an expert to go through, and experts are doing this in court cases. Researchers, investigators, detectives are going through eyewitness reports for different cases of people who are accused of different things, and they can find the thread of truth that goes through the testimony of the various eyewitnesses. And that's how expert it is. Well, obviously gone on too long about this now, but because of this book, I have decided, and I've already spoke to Pastor Timio, I am a committed member of our little church here in Burgos. I'm a committed member, and when I'm not under house arrest, I go around and I bring in children and adults, families, and I bring them into church, and then I make sure that they get home safely. And I'm committed on that, and I want to continue to help on that and to help in any other ways. We're already taking in more gifts which will help the church, fans and stuff like that. These offers of help and gifts of money have come in, and we've already been able to go out. Beth has been out yesterday, I think, or the day before, and bought, I think, 3 or 4 fans to go into the church, which get a ton of people in there, and that's what it needs. So they're already coming in, and we're already committed to helping. So, but the point being that I've already decided that in the middle of I think it's in the middle of August, I'm not quite sure, either in the middle of August or possibly September, I will be baptized. And this book, it's a terrible hackneyed phrase that people use for all kinds of insignificant events in their life, but this, because it is added to years and years of study, months and months of intensive study of the Bible when I was living with Beth in Cebu, where I studied Bible at the Bible Study Center, one-on-one, as I've explained in other videos. I've decided that this book, because of the testimony of all of these different scholars and the way that they put it, it has made me realize that I must commit, and I am going to be baptized. So that's the news there, and the result of this book. So for the man Daryl, who said, "I hate to dishearten you, I hate to disillusion you," Daryl, you haven't really listened to what I've been saying about this book, but thanks for being concerned and telling me that yes, what I have to do. I already know what I have to do, but I appreciate that you even cared to write such a long email. Thank you. But this is a foreigner in the Philippines. Thanks a lot.